There's a pattern buried inside the American survival show alone that nobody wants to admit out loud. The best hunters are almost always the first ones the medics carry out. The rules are simple and brutal. 10 survival experts each dropped alone into a different stretch of wilderness. No food, no supplies, not even a camera crew. Whoever lasts longest walks away with $500,000. The medical threshold isn't up for debate either. Once your BMI drops below 17, you're pulled, no matter how badly you want to stay. By any reasonable logic, the ones carrying a bow and a knife should have the strongest footing out there. But season after season, it's the deer chasers and the ones staking out game trails who end up medically evacuated, hearts hammering out of rhythm from starvation, while the so-called lazy ones, crouched by the water all day running fishnets and traps, are the ones still standing at the end. Isn't hunting supposed to be the single greatest survival skill there is? So what's actually going on here? The answer is sitting inside a ledger. What ledger? Hold that thought. The story starts hundreds of thousands of years ago, with your own ancestors. Out in the wild, every bite of food is income. Every step, every swing of a blade is an expense. Run a deficit for 3 or 4 days straight, and the body starts cannibalizing itself just to patch the hole. Muscle first, then strength, then reaction time, until you can't even afford the energy to chase down a deer. And hunting is the riskiest line item on that entire ledger. You track, you run, you lie in ambush for hours, burning thousands of calories, and the moment the animal gets away, every one of those calories is gone for nothing. This isn't speculation. Anthropologists have kept decades of field records on the Hadza of East Africa, one of the last peoples on Earth still living as full-time hunter-gatherers, and the record doesn't leave much room for doubt. Men who go after big game fail far more often than they succeed. Several independent research teams have run the numbers, and they all land in the same range, a success rate of 1 to 3%. Out of 100 hunts, 97 to 99 come home empty-handed. So what actually feeds the camp? Foraging does. Women go out every day digging tubers, picking berries, gathering baobab fruit. None of it runs. None of it fights back. It just sits there, day after day, quietly balancing the books. Add it up, and most of the calories that reach a camp's stomach came from foraging, not the hunt. The San of southern Africa tell the same story, half a world away. Anthropologist Richard Lee lived among them in the 1960s, and found their staple was a nut called mongongo, so abundant on the ground that nobody could ever pick it all. By his account, the San only needed about 10 or 20 hours a week of actual work to eat well. One line from his field notes has survived. A Sandman turned the question back on him. With this much mongongo just lying on the ground, why would anyone bother farming? So that image everyone carries around, the caveman hauling a spear after a woolly mammoth every single day, is mostly something the movies invented. The real ancestors were sharp accountants. Meat was the bonus. Foraging was the paycheck. And this wasn't just a casual misconception. For a while, it was stamped as official science. In 1968, the University of Chicago hosted an academic conference literally called Man the Hunter, and once the conference papers were published, the entire story of human evolution got written up as one long heroic epic of men chasing beasts with spears. It took until 1975 for anthropologist Sally Slocum to publish an essay asking the field a simple question. What about the women? They were foraging, raising children, keeping the camp's calorie income running. Why did that get written as a footnote? She laid the books open herself, and the answer was clear. What actually kept a tribe's ledger in the black was never those spears. But there's a nastier trap hiding inside this ledger, one that's caught even professional, well-equipped explorers. Eating nothing but meat can starve you too. Early 20th century Arctic explorer Vilhjalmur Stefansson documented this himself, and it later got a name: rabbit starvation. Rabbit meat is so lean it carries almost no fat, and if the human body is running on pure lean protein with no fat or carbohydrate to share the load, the liver can't keep up with the waste, and the kidneys end up flushing it out by force. You get thirstier, weaker, hungrier the more you eat meat going into your stomach every single day, while your body walks itself towards starvation anyway. Stefansson later ran an even bolder experiment on himself. In 1928, he and another man checked into Bellevue Hospital in New York, and under a doctor's constant watch, ate nothing but meat for a full year and 10 days. Steak, organs, brain, tongue, never skipping the fatty cuts. When it ended, the doctors declared both men perfectly healthy. No scurvy, stable weight. He'd proven the same point with his own body. Meat can be your only food as long as you never skip the fat. Which is why an experienced hunter, first thing after a kill, doesn't reach for the loin. Go straight for the marrow, the organs, the fat under the skin. On the calorie ledger, fat is the hard currency. So lay the whole ledger flat on the table. Where should you actually be looking for food out there? The order runs completely against instinct. Rank 1, the water's edge. After the tide goes out, clams, mussels, and snails are just sitting there on the wet sand. No chase, no strategy, just bend over and collect the calories. This isn't new either. Coastlines around the world are covered in what archaeologists call shell middens, ancient mounds of discarded shells, built up over thousands of years. That's your ancestors casting their vote for rank 1 one shell at a time. Rank 2. Unglamorous plants. Cattail growing at a swamp's edge has a starchy root and edible young shoots. Survivalists actually call it the supermarket of the swamp. Dried, ground inner pine bark genuinely carried Nordic communities through famine winters, and pine needle tea even has vitamin C in it. Rank 3. Insects. Sounds like the least dignified option on the list, and it's the single best deal on the ledger. Crickets, grasshoppers, fat grubs pulled straight out of dead wood, all of it carries more protein density than beef and takes almost no effort to catch. One rule, and it matters. Skip anything brightly colored, skip anything covered in hair. Rank 4. And only now, finally, animals. But not by chasing them, by trapping them. A snare on a game trail, a fish trap sunk in a river. You sleep, and the trap keeps working. It's the only hunting method on Earth that keeps earning while you're unconscious. The Gunditjmara people of southwestern Australia left behind an entire stone eel trapping system called Budge Bim. The rising tide brings the eels in, and the falling tide won't let them back out. The system has been in continuous use for at least 6,600 years, and in 2019, it was named a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Not because it's spectacular to look at, but because it proves that permanent settlement is thousands of years older than the textbooks say. And the highest level of this ledger is outsourcing the search itself to somebody else entirely. There's a bird in Africa called the honey guide. It loves beeswax, but can't break into a hive on its own. So somewhere along the way, it learned to do something else. Instead, find a human. Researchers have documented exactly how it works. Beekeepers in Mozambique make a specific call into the trees, and the honey guide comes flying in, leading the way in short bursts, straight to a wild hive. The person takes the honey. The bird eats the wax. Nobody loses. Scientists actually tested this rigorously. The same beekeepers, half the time making the real honey guide call, half the time making a different sound as a control, and measuring the success rate each way. The numbers came back. An ordinary call succeeded about 17% of the time. The real call pushed that to 54%. More than triple. A wild bird and a human being, running the exact same partnership for who knows how many generations. Ancestors took this ledger all the way out to that level. So this story doesn't leave you a checklist. Just one rule, and a piece of math to walk you through it. The rule: don't let the ledger go negative. The math: chase a deer, and a full day of tracking, running, and waiting in ambush burns thousands of calories, while the odds of it getting away are far higher than you'd think. That's a negative yield investment. Set a line of traps instead, and once they're down, you spend 0 more calories. You sleep. The traps work. You walk out in the morning and collect. That's positive yield. Most people who starved to death in the wild weren't too weak to survive. They bet what little capital they had left on the negative yield option, and lost. So if you were genuinely starving out there tomorrow, what would your first instinct actually be? Go hunt something. Now you know better. That instinct is exactly the one that gets people killed. Head for the water first. One last thing, worth sitting with for a second. The earliest cameras humans ever had, cave paintings, are almost entirely hunting scenes. Running bison, hunters with spears raised overhead. But what actually got your ancestors through every single winter was someone quietly remembering which cluster of berries would ripen next week, which stream would have fish running through it by morning, which tree's fruit the birds were already fighting over. The hunter's story has survived 30,000 years on cave walls. And the only reason you're sitting here right now listening to any of this is that another group of people kept quiet, unglamorous records for 30,000 years straight. The ledger just never made it onto camera. So, hunting's a dead end. Foraging must be safe then, right? Not so fast. Assuming something's edible, just because it won't chase you or bite you, is a different trap, older, and even more deadly, because this one can fool even the book. 1992. Deep in the Alaskan wilderness. Cod. Beside a body that had starved to death lay a field guide, the same field guide that had gotten him through more than 100 days. The one he trusted for more than 100 days. Open it to that page, and the plant that nearly killed him is listed, in black and white, as edible. An answer that got you through 100 days, that you trusted for 100 days, can turn around and kill you on day 101. Next story. See you there?